Put it together for a guy who is a three-time Oscar-winning filmmaker, award-winning author. His latest is a collection of short stories, and I'm very anxious to and intrigued, anxious to talk to him and intrigued by this project. Well, how about it for Mark Harris, everybody? Hey, Mark.
Oh,
Congratulations, sir.
thank you.
Yeah.
2 marks.
Yeah. 2 marks. It's easy to keep track of us. It's funny. I was reading some stuff from you that had to do with film and film criticism. And then I'm thinking, is this the Mark Harris that I'm talking to, or is this another Mark Harris?
That is another Mark Harris.
Okay.
That's the Mark Harris who used to write for Entertainment Weekly. Mark
That's
Harris.
so funny.
Mark Harris turns out to be a common name. That's why I use Mark Jonathan Harris to distinguish me from the other Marks.
That's great. I just tell me about your career in film. Tell me about your career in show business a little bit, and then I want to get to your latest project.
I started out making documentary films in the 60s during the Vietnam War, the whole political. I was politicized during the 60s. And the first important film that I made was about Cesar Chavez and the Delano grape strike. And I made a number of political films at that time. Then I came to Hollywood, and my career took many ups and downs. I had started out as a newspaper reporter, and when it was difficult to raise money for to make documentaries, I went back to journalism. I was a contributing editor to New West magazine, wrote for a lot of magazines. And then my documentary career picked up again. Early on in my career, I won an Oscar when I was very young, and I thought, this is easy. And it turns out I misjudged how difficult it was, and it was 30 years before I won another Oscar. And then the third Oscar came 3 years later. By the third Oscar, I thought, maybe I do have a career as a documentary filmmaker.
The first film was the Chavez film. The second two films were associated with what?
The Holocaust.
Uh-huh.
Actually, the first film that won the Academy Award was a film called The Redwoods, and it was made for the Sierra Club to help establish a Redwood National Park. So those were the days, early environmental movement. Then later on, I did some historical films, and now I'm actually back to making social political documentaries. I made a film called Breaking Point: The War for Democracy in Ukraine, which I co-directed with Oles Sanyan, a Ukrainian director. And my most recent film was called Foster. It was about the foster care system in Los Angeles. It was on HBO.
Oh, wow. That's just terrific. I think I saw your Breaking Point film. Was that a Netflix film, or where was that? What was it?
It was shown theatrically, and then it was on Peacock.
Peacock. Okay, maybe I saw. I remember it had to do with Ukraine. Is
Yes.
that right? Yeah. I thought I'd seen that, but this is, of course, and this is the idea that you hear about these things, you get interested, and you go back and check these things out. So it's really great that your work is celebrated the way it was, because clearly you have a real and I think the Holocaust stuff that you have done, some of these stories. One of them was with the Kindersport, where the children are put on a train. Isn't that what happens?
It was British rescue mission 9 months prior to the start of World War II. Britain was the only country willing to take in children. They took in 10,000 unaccompanied minors from Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Germany. These were predominantly Jewish children. Their parents put them on a train because send them into the arms of strangers to a country whose language they didn't speak, to people they didn't know. And most of their parents never saw them again.
So incredible, and not that long ago, you know.
Oh, and the film, that's the film that's probably I'm best known for, and it was chosen by the Library of Congress for the National Film Registry, which means that it will be preserved for a long time.
Tell me about these short stories that you've written now. This is a collection of different tales.
Right. It's when you make a film, some of these stories grew out of my experience making films. One of the stories is called Mute, and it's about a father coping or trying to come to grips with the fact that his son is autistic and that is not the son he imagined to have. And that grew out of a long experience creating a website on autism that I produced while I was teaching at the University of Southern California. It was a 5-year project funded by the Agency for Health Research and Quality in Washington to try to present videos of the best evidence-based treatments for autism. And I was still haunted by these issues. And these are you can't tell all the stories you want in film. And that's one of the stories. Another story came out of the work that I did in foster care. It's like when you go to sleep at night, the stories that still haunt you that you haven't been able to communicate. I found that fiction and writing short stories was the best way to communicate them.
It's interesting to hear a filmmaker speak about the fact that the written word oftentimes can tell stories and relate details and perhaps texture of an issue better than a documentary film can. And yet a documentary film is so wonderful in just that verite. I mean, in witnessing.
I mean, that's true. The difference in writing fiction is easier to get into the minds of your characters. In film, we understand what people think through what we see them do and through their actions. But in fiction, you can actually enter someone's mind, their thought processes, in a way that it's more difficult to do in film.
So I've only got another minute or so, but I wanted to ask you about the state of documentary film. This is great that this is the book, and we'll have a link to the book. And I'm just so excited for you, Mark Jonathan Harris. You're obviously such a gifted, you're a gifted guy. I mean, you're on the right side of every issue, and you actually can bring them to life in different ways in different media. But with all of that said, so we'll have a link to it. But now I want to ask you about the state of documentary filmmaking now, because I feel as though it's entered another renaissance. And I wonder, as a documentary filmmaker, how you feel about that.
I think that's definitely true. I think aesthetically, documentaries are better than they've ever been. There are more options. Filmmakers are using more techniques. They're using animation, recreation. They're using special effects. They're using all the tools of cinema to communicate what the experiences that they've gone through. And the market constantly changing. If you had asked me this 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, yeah, this is the best time economically for documentaries. And in fact, documentaries shown at Sundance and then sold for $20 million. But now there's been, in the last year or so, where the streaming services are reevaluating their financial model, there's been cutbacks. You can still sell a documentary if it's true crime, it's celebrity, it's about music, but a political documentary is a little more difficult these days. The pendulum constantly going back and forth. I'm hoping, because I have some projects that I would love to get funded, I'm hoping that the appetite for political documentaries will again return, especially at this moment in time.
How much is this? Is now I'm way over time, but let me ask this one last question. You talked about funding; it made me think of it. How much is it on average to produce a documentary film?
It depends. An hour for PBS these days might be around $750,000, but the budgets go up. Spending over $1 million to $2 million is not unheard of these days.
When we see an hour of Frontline, let's say, that's a documentary series. It's usually they can do that. They bring it in just under $1 million an hour.
Yeah, I would say so. I don't know their exact budget, but yeah.
Yeah, but you'd say that just as representative.
I'm doing a film now for PBS, and the budget's around $750,000.
Yeah. It's funny that that it's hard. We're used to these big budget, you're used to hearing, you get sticker shock when you look at some of these budgets, and still these small documentary films struggle to get the funding necessary. And the stuff you're talking about and the film's focus in your case is always just so relevant, so important. And yet
I think in the era of superhero movies, I think there is a hunger for films about real world and about the issues that affect us all.
Albert, put up if you would please, the cover of the book. Again, it's called Misfits. These are short stories by Mark Jonathan Harris, and the Oscar winner, documentary filmmaker and thinker, professor. I can't wait to get into them, and I can't wait to go back and see some of your work, which I will do.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Mark. Pleasure to meet you.
Yes, right back at you. Thank you, Mark Jonathan Harris.
Okay.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.